Hello and welcome. You are listening to the Gay with God podcast, a safe place for us to share our stories and support one another. How long did we know? What challenges did we face? Did we lose our faith? When did we find our way back home? Or are we still searching? The stories you hear on this podcast will melt your heart and strengthen your belief that in God, all things are possible, and you can be authentically gay with the God of your understanding. I am your host, Midge Noble, and I am very honored that you are here. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Gay with God podcast. I am Midge Noble, your host, and I'm so excited to tell you that today it's not just me. I have a guest, and I love having guests because I love to hear everybody's stories and to honor your story. And I also believe that every person that comes on here says something that you need to hear. I believe that with my heart. Everybody that I ever interview has something that I need to hear. So I'm excited about what's about to happen today. As always, I want to remind you of our Wild Goose Festival that's coming up on July 11th through the 14th. It's at the Van Hoy Farms in Union Grove, North Carolina. It's a wonderful experience that has a lot of community that is grounded in faith-inspired social justice. It's a one-of-a-kind gathering. I've never been to anything like it. It brings together activists, artists, seekers, and from all walks of life to explore social justice, art, spirituality, and community. I've never seen so many gay flags in one place unless you go to a Pride march, but it's just so open and so diverse. Will everybody agree with you? Probably not, but it's a place where you can talk and express your feelings and talk about what you want to talk about and be accepted. So it will be hot. I'm not going to lie. It's the hottest place I've ever been, but you do have some options. You can camp, you can glamp. Statesville is right near there. You can get a hotel and come on over for the day. There's lots of options. So please just make a decision now to go, and you can get a discount on your ticket price because you are a Gay with God follower. I will give you a discount code from the Wild Goose Festival, and you can get $50 off your adult weekend ticket, which is pretty cool. And so if you go to the show page at empoweredmidge.podbean.com, you can get that discount code, and I will hope to see you there. I will be taping live at the Wild Goose Festival with the Gay with God podcast, and I have a great guest lined up for that. So woohoo! It's a win-win-win-win-win. And the other win is that I have a guest. Erica Vogel, her pronouns are she, hers, is the author of Advice from Trans Aunty book. She is a queer, transgender woman, parent, spouse, public speaker, and mentor, frequently referred to as resilient, fearless, authentic, and inviting. Erica meets people where they are with love and grace. She is passionate about improving the quality of lives around her and creating safe and inclusive spaces for LGBTQIA+ people to thrive within. Erica is an award-winning senior product manager by trade in financial technology. She has more than 20 years of experience in design, strategy, and product management for some of the world's top companies. She is married to a wonderful queer woman and is a proud wife and is the parent of both adult and tween-aged children and 2 hefty cats. Her family is full of LGBTQIA+ representation as well, with members that are lesbian, gay, transgender, queer, and asexual, aromantic. Wow, Erica, I love it. I love all of it. Welcome to the Gay with God podcast.
Well, thanks for having me on, Midge. I really appreciate having the chance to come and talk to you.
Oh, me too. We met the other day online, and I just was so excited after our conversation. I clicked with you immediately, and I just loved being around you. And when this says resilient, fearless, authentic, and inviting are the 2 things I felt for sure the day that we met. Yeah. So I am so happy that you're here in the Gay with God house. So I'll just start with what I always start with. Tell us your story.
Oh, my story. Woo-hoo. Okay. Well, as you've noted out there, I am a queer transgender woman. I have known since I was about 5 that I was not like the other kids in school. have a story about that where
Okay.
I started off school in a Southern Baptist church at school, like
Mm,
daycare, pre-K, all
mm,
of that stuff,
mm-hmm,
mostly populated by girls. So that's who I played with, and I was like, great, this is who I am. But then for when I started first grade, I believe, no, kindergarten, I believe, my father put me in a private school run by the Catholic Church, which
mm,
that's kind of a big switch. And the first day that I showed up for school, he had a blue, baby blue VW Beetle. This is way back in the 70s. Um, and we pulled up in front of school. He dropped me and my brother off. And I remember looking at the girls and the boys and thinking, why am I not dressed like the girls? Why don't I have
mm-hmm,
the classic skirt on and what we think of as this
mm-hmm,
Catholic schoolgirl uniform? I said, Dad, why am I
mm-hmm.
not dressed like them? He's like, they're girls and you're a boy. This was a shock to me.
Oh no.
It's a shock. I was like, what? And so then on life goes from there, right? I discovered that I was
Uh-huh.
actually a boy, um, and wrestled with that throughout a lot of my life. So
Mm-hmm,
certainly something that was sort of squashed in the Southern
mm-hmm.
Baptist Church. Certainly something that would have was not something I could have brought up to the nuns at the Catholic
No,
church I was
no.
going to. And throughout the rest of my life, I got involved, learned about quite a few different religious institutions. My best friend growing up was Roman Catholic, so I would occasionally go to mass with him. I
Mm-hmm.
was there when he officially became an altar boy, right? So
Oh.
I grew up around a lot of that. I had friends who were Jewish. So I would say I was a person that studied and had a lot of introduction to theology across the board,
Mm-hmm.
as well as being kind of a new agey person as well. Right. And so the impetus for this was not only was that I was interested in spiritual pursuits, right? What might that
Mm-hmm.
my life would have meaning, but I was also looking for an answer to the question of why am I not a girl?
Mm-hmm.
Why do
Mm-hmm.
people think that I'm a boy? Why do I not think that I'm a boy?
Mm-hmm.
And so my growing up through my teen years and my adult years, I was, trying different things to try to help me answer this question. And eventually, after going out into the world, pursuing career, being married, having kids, being a very involved parent, being the primary parent for a lot of that, um, I got to the point where my life just wasn't working. I
Mm-hmm.
had asked, I'd prayed to every God I could find.
Mm-hmm.
I'd done all kinds of introspection, trying to find my ways around this, looking at this as a challenge. And in the end of the day, it doesn't go away. And
Mm-hmm.
I had an incident three 3 years ago now where I severely injured my back for it just showed up out of nowhere. I think it was December
Mm-hmm.
12th. I remember this day very clearly. Woke up with tons of low back pain, and that just was unresolved. So it got me to urgent care and then to my doctor. I went through every medical procedure and test you can think of to figure out what this was, right? And eventually we were thinking, okay, it's got to be cancer after like
Mm-hmm.
multiple MRIs, multiple CAT scans, blood work, all kinds of other stuff. And sitting there in that week or two waiting for results, like you're kind of like
Mm-hmm.
left to sort of sit in this, like, is it or is it not,
Mm-hmm.
Eventually it turned out not to be cancer. It turned out to be um, not to bore people too much, a small structural muscle in your back that if it's not working, it just causes everything to
Wow.
fail, right?
Wow.
So physical therapy was the answer. I'm not fully recovered, 3 years down the road, I'm still working at
Wow.
it.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
yep. Still deal with some back pain. But I'm able to be active and kind of go back to the life I had before. But in that moment of like,
Mm-hmm.
is it cancer?
Yeah.
Especially at the time of having just turned 50.
Mm.
No, I was turning 50 that year.
Turning 50. Uh-huh.
It's like I've achieved all the accolades. I've won
Mm.
awards. I've worked for top companies in the US. I am financially secure-ish. I have a home that I like. I live in a place that I like. I have a partner that I love. I have kids that are doing great. And yet there's this part of me that still feels like, what has your life been about?
Mm.
And in that moment, I decided, look, it's time that we deal with this. And, when you take a look at the literature, when you take a look at medical recommendations, transition is the cure. for being
Mm.
transgender. That is the course of treatment. It's widely accepted, despite what the national narrative would have you believe. And it was time to move forward, and that's what I did. And it's been one of the best things that I've done in my life, right? I instantly noticed a difference in how my brain was working, especially when I started female hormones, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it has categorically changed my life to one that feels like I am my best self, one where I feel like my life has meaning, one where the challenge that I was facing wasn't not to be trans, but to make a meaningful life as trans.
Mm.
So
That's
that's where we
that's
are today, and I'm in the process of writing a book.
and thank you for coming. So no,
Yes.
no, there's so much more. So I want to go back a little bit um to when your father answered that question and you were shocked. Was he shocked that that you didn't realize that you were a boy? I mean, did you get any vibes
Mm,
from him that, that was like not the answer he thought his son would have?
my father is a lot of things. Observant of the people around him is not one of those things. He,
Mm-hmm.
I love my dad, and we have a relationship that works for us.
Mm.
Uh, but he's an electrical engineer, and if you're not a circuit board, you're just not interesting, is kind of his point of view. My father is
Uh-huh.
also gay. Like he had come out uh 2 years prior to this point of us having this sort of moment in the blue VW Beetle, right?
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. And so, but you gotta imagine this was fully 1976. Like our exposure to transgenderedness was like the closest we got was drag, right? Or what
Uh-huh.
we were seeing in the movies, with various
Uh-huh.
things like that. So it wasn't something he was thinking about. And knowing him, having talked to him about this, he's like, I mean, A, I don't even remember that. And B, I probably was just trying to get to work and get you out of the car. Um,
Truth.
so
Truth.
so
Yeah.
he just sort of blew past it. Like we didn't readdress it because
Mm-hmm.
also, like at the time, there weren't words for this,
Right.
right? Like no one says I'm a girl, not a boy.
Yeah.
Today we have language that goes with that, but then we didn't really have language for that, and people would have thought, "Wow, that's you got some wrong ideas, kiddo." And especially
Yeah.
coming from someone he is part of the Southern Baptist Church.
Mm-hmm.
He is a very religious man in and of himself, despite being gay,
Mm-hmm.
and that just would have been something like I'm not dealing with. And frankly, the
Mm-hmm.
reason he was in that situation was because upon their separation and divorce, my mom took off for 3 years,
Oh.
right? So he was on his own, and he was just trying to get his two kids to school so he could go off to work as an audio
Mm-hmm.
engineer.
Mm. So with your mom leaving like that, that's really hard on kids just in general. And at the age of 5-ish, I mean, that's your developmental moments right there. And it
Yeah.
sounds like there was conflict possibly in that family anyway. Um,
Yes.
you were at a deficit emotionally. And then also, as far as the transition goes, trying to figure yourself out and nobody to talk to about it. Because you're right. I mean, that it took longer, I think, for trans representation. It took us forever to get Ellen to say she was gay. You know,
Yeah.
you know,
Not
we,
really that long
it
ago.
wasn't that long ago. That's right.
No.
Incredible. And so just as our culture has evolved, we've gone from secrecy for so long and lack of representation and good representation. We were always represented in movies and films as the murderer or the or the
Yeah. The
pedophile,
psycho.
the psycho. And
Yeah.
so, even for us to try to unpack our own self,
Mhm.
because we
Mhm.
have nothing but bad experiences that we've seen, in television, in the news, and through churches. And Southern
Absolutely. Yeah.
Baptist, that's no joke. I mean, that's Southern Baptist and
Yeah.
Roman Catholic. I mean, you were bombarded by
Mhm.
bigotry and
Yeah.
yeah.
And I didn't mention this in our story though. You and I talked about it before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The church that my father belonged to, and I said he's an electrical engineer, but he's also an audio engineer. I don't know if I made
Mm-hmm.
that clear.
Mm.
He ran the video and the sound for Dr. Schuler's church in Florida, one of the first televised mega churches in the
Mm-hmm.
US, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's the church that I belong to. So someone like me was definitely not on the menu of acceptance.
No, no. So you were in your 50s. You
Mhm.
said when you were going through this journey of trying to figure out if you were possibly dying, and when you did decide, this is what I need to do, this is
Mhm.
what's going to bring me peace, this is who I am, how did that land with the family?
I had been open for 2 or 3 years about the fact that I felt non-binary, at
Mm-hmm.
least. Like I knew that I didn't feel male,
Mm-hmm.
mostly male, right? That I felt kind of somewhere in between. And so I'd been talking about it. My wife and I had been talking about it a lot, and it was an area of a lot of difficulty for us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a hard thing to go through. People have really set notions of what it means to be in a relationship with someone who's a certain gender, right? So not
Mm-hmm.
only was I going through a lot, but it was putting my wife in this situation of also having to really grapple with gender and sexuality of her own, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Fortunately, she is a queer woman, so that made some of that a little bit easier, but it still was quite a process for us. But as I was going through this pain, this painful back process, and coming out of that, and also feeling to the point where I was worried about self-harm. Effectively, that's how
Mm-hmm.
bad my dysphoria was.
Mm-hmm.
My depression and my anxiety and were around this. That I eventually said to her one day, like, "Look, babe, I have to tell you, I'm worried about self-harm."
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that was kind
Mm-hmm.
of it for both of us. We were like, okay, no matter what it is, that's, we got to move forward. And
Mm-hmm.
the other part of the story that I haven't talked about with, I don't know if I mentioned it to you when we spoke, but my second oldest child is a trans woman as well. And she came out after a few weeks after I came out as non-binary, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the first 2 years of her transition went relatively well, but then she really slipped into some really deep anxiety and depression and made 3 attempts on her life,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we had a family history of
Mm-hmm.
that's how bad things can get. And so
Mm-hmm.
staring that down myself, I knew that I had crossed a bridge, that
Mm-hmm.
as a person who has always faced their challenges and always found a way to work through them,
Mm-hmm.
considering self-harm as an option, I knew was the moment where it didn't matter what I thought, whether I thought I could be safe, whether I thought I could be happy. I had to try the only thing left to me at that point. And my
Mm-hmm.
wife recognized it as well. We've worked our butts off over the last 3 years to build a solid foundation. She is my person. She is
Mm-hmm.
the person that I would spend all of my time with. I work actually entirely remote in my job, and she's only in the office 2 days a week for her job. I would be happy if we spent 7 days a week together. That is that is how devoted we are to each other, and she feels the same way. Certainly we do like
Mm-hmm.
our alone time, right? But
Mm-hmm.
um there was just never a question between the two of us that we wouldn't work our butts off to get through this. We waited a long time to meet each other. We waited a long time to build a relationship that was everything we had hoped for out of a partner, because this is my second marriage. And so we got through it. In terms of my kids, like as you said at the top, I have a lot of LGBTQ plus
Mm-hmm.
representation. All of them are somewhere part of the rainbow. They weren't
Mm-hmm.
terribly surprised, and they've been wildly supportive. So my experience being trans, especially living in the DC metro area, has been quite wonderful, quite friendly. I have had very few negative interactions, and I've had nothing but support from the people around me. And that's made a
Mm-hmm.
huge world of difference.
Mm-hmm.
When we see people who do not have support in affirming whoever they are, whether it's trans or gay or lesbian or something else out there in the world, um, the the rates of difficulty skyrocket from there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of worrying about someone um, maybe making a wrong choice, how about we
Mm-hmm.
support that person so that they have the platform and the support network with which to find out what makes them their best self?
Mm-hmm. Somebody asked me one time, why are there so many people in recovery in the gay community? I said, because we had to put up smoke screens to
Yeah.
one, to deny who we were, eating disorders, alcoholism,
Hmm.
suicidal ideations, attempts. All of those things are ways for us to cope, to keep ourselves quiet. and to deal with the pain maybe of knowing and not being able to say, or being threatened, being kicked out of families. I mean, there is so much that goes on in the coming out process individually, not even as a collective, but individually. And then, coping skills are not always healthy. And we don't know how to, when you're in that much pain and that much angst, you take a drink, you smoke a cigarette, you smoke some pot. I'm not advocating any of this, by the way. Okay. Just as a say.
or you shop, or you gamble, or you disassociate from the world, or you invest yourself entirely in your career and ignore your surroundings.
Exactly.
Or you're my dad and only talk to circuit boards, right?
Right.
Which he's made a career out of, but that was his coping mechanism, because he's not really a drinker or a smoker. He doesn't do drugs. His coping mechanism is fixing things. Right. And so there's all variety, all manner. Yes, there's a lot of people in recovery in the community. And when you take a look at it, it's the way you laid it out. It's when people can't come out and be affirmed by their family and their community, it's a traumatic moment. It's a traumatic event that keeps happening. And those of us in the community know that you never get to stop coming out.
I know.
Right. I just had it. I was on a business trip to Arkansas last week, and I had someone ask me inappropriate questions about being trans at lunch with 4 other people who ignored what was going on. And it's not a secret that I'm trans. I don't make that a secret at all. And, you keep having to have that moment of, oh gosh, here we go.
Yeah.
What am I going to say?
Yeah.
Right. And when you think about wrestling with that day in and day out, it's no wonder that a lot of us are in recovery. And I think that's what I would love for people in their broader community, that are not part of the LGBTQIA community, whether you are going to church or something else, is to understand that when who you are at a basic level is demonized for what is effectively your humanity, it's really hard to exist and cope with that. We all have trauma. And I think many people in their lives that are not part of the community have a traumatic event in their life that causes them a recurring problem for a way in which who they were, something they were experienced, was demonized and made the entirety of their person by other people.
Right. And then you put on the church guilt and shame and the religious trauma. I mean, I think that's what, and I told you, and I've told the folks here on the podcast that is the single thing that I just couldn't overcome. I mean, of course, I wanted my family to love me and approve of me always, but that wasn't going to happen one way or the other necessarily. But it was that fear of what they always preached. And I grew up Advent Christian. It wasn't pure Southern Baptist. We had a lot of the same doctrine. And it was still that thing about my papa, hellfire and brimstone boy, no cards, no dancing, no movies. And we didn't live with him, but my daddy parented the way his father wanted him to parent, because that's what happens. So that little nucleus of structure, overt structure, religious trauma structure can define a child. And the last thing I wanted to do was be in the lake of fire for the rest of my life. I mean, they scared the bejesus out of me. It wasn't about Jesus. It was about don't go to hell. That's all it was.
Exactly. I have so many similar experiences where I was like, oh my God, I'm going to hell.
Yeah. Yeah.
For just being myself. Right. That's a wild concept to give people, right?
Yes.
That who you are as a basic premise is wrong. Now, granted, I totally understand religion. I grew up in it. I've been around it. I've investigated it. I've looked at it from every angle that I possibly can without actually pursuing a degree.
That's right.
As a person who believes in something more than myself, knowing that basic tenets of myself that are unchangeable, immutable, effectively, right, can be perceived as so wrong just for drawing breath is a wild stance to take, especially when my whole point of view is you do you and I'll do me. And as long as you're putting who you want to be on the table, I'll support and get behind that. Right? Why can't you get behind me? How can you miss the happiness on my face, the happiness in my existence in my life, and tell me I'm wrong?
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
because and that's, as well as I do, because the people who are denouncing us have the same fear of hell that we grew up in.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
taught it to us. Somebody taught it to them. They can't
Mhm.
shake it. They were not bold enough to question. They weren't allowed to question. And the Episcopal Church is the first church, and thank goodness there's so many other churches now that you can
Yeah.
look to for open and affirming space if you want the
Hmm.
structure of a church family. But the Episcopal Church was the first one I knew about that was open and affirming. And Bishop Curry made it quite evident that this love is the way, and we
Yeah.
do not discriminate. Now, local churches might in the
Of
Episcopal
course.
Church
Of course.
because
Yeah.
it's still the South where I am, and
Yeah.
that's the way it goes. But to be open and affirming, and to tell people the Bible is not condemning homosexuality. The Bible is not. Those verses never, 1946, the movie is a really important movie.
It sure is. This was not an issue until that time when we
That's exactly
decided that, oh, we need to make an issue of this in order to be a conservative, God-fearing nation, right?
right. Right. And even though David Fearon said you can't put those two Greek words together and make it say that, those words were never supposed to be together in that
Yes.
translation, but yet we didn't want to take it back out when we figured it out because, there was political stuff going on. There was civil unrest going on, and
Yeah.
we're not going to make waves. But even though we have that, people who are in the deep fear of I'm going to go to hell and I can't agree with you, they can't even accept that, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So it comes back to us to either not use that or to find somebody who is more open and affirming and
Hmm.
progressive and allow ourselves to do what we want to do for us. For me, I always felt that they stole my faith because even though you technically aren't supposed to be able to, but I was weak enough to where I bought everything they
Hmm.
preached. And so when I finally figured out that, hey, y'all are wrong, I'm taking it back.
Yeah. Yeah, you
I,
do.
you gotta.
I think you have to in this
Mm-hmm.
community and in various other marginalized communities, right? You
Mm-hmm.
have to take your faith back. And
Mm-hmm.
I think ultimately that's what worked for me. I have a personal relationship with God. I have a
Mm-hmm.
personal relationship with something beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what works for me. I always no matter what church I was in, no matter where I was, I always felt like I had my own language, my own conversation going
Good.
on, communing
Mm-hmm.
with myself and something greater. And
Mm-hmm.
that served me very well. And I think at the end of the day, what was hard for me was someone else saying, no, I am the conduit through which God flows and you are wrong. And you don't get to
Mm.
have that. Right.
Mm.
But somehow they have it because they're the head of a church, of a local
Mm.
church, or they're an elder
They're the
or
priest.
whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
why don't I get to have that? And I think,
Mm-hmm.
this is something I get asked a lot, where people are like, well, I'm going to pray for you to figure it out. I'm like, I don't need you to pray for me to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
I need you to pray for me to continue to find happiness in my life,
Yeah.
right? Who are you to say that the
Mm-hmm.
challenge that I was given wasn't to not be trans, but to be trans and make an important life out of it?
Yes. Yes. And I think it has to be the personal relationship because with or without the church is only there to offer support and to be that safe space where you can do your own personal journey.
Yeah.
And that always has to be. I don't believe that I have to go through anybody. And even though there is a
Hmm.
priest at the Episcopal Church, it's not the same thing as like the priest, the Pope. It's not the
Yeah.
same thing. We do have our own relationship, with the God of our understanding. And I think it has to be the God of our understanding because it
Yeah.
is a personal journey. Work out your own salvation. Well, y'all
Hmm.
pay attention to that line. Work out your own salvation. And that means it is personal.
Yeah.
And even though we may be a communal group in a church, we're still personally an individual that we
Yeah.
have to make it right.
And I believe that I have, right? And that I am
Mm-hmm.
continuing to do so.
Yes.
You know, if brought on stage in front of God and asked important questions about my life, I'm not going to be talking about the things that I regret because I lead my life by rectifying the things that I regret,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
When I have done something wrong, I own up to it and I address it and I work to change myself. I have overcome every other obstacle that's been put in front of me in my life. I worked diligently at that. I've
Mm-hmm.
worked at kindness. I've worked
Mm-hmm.
at advocacy and supporting voices that were had to be quieter than mine. I have done so many things in my life to be the best version of myself, and I am trans.
Mm-hmm.
I believe there's no conversation that I would ever have with God where he's like, boy, you really screwed it up.
Mm-mm.
I believe the conversation will be, I love that you kept working at yourself and working
Mm-hmm.
at being of service to other people around you,
Mm-hmm.
and you did what I asked.
Mm-hmm. And God wants us to be joyful and be
Mhm.
the best version of who he created us to be. And
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if I said this to you. See, we had this conversation and now we can't remember what we talked about. But I think I said this to you that I really believe when I asked my priest when I was struggling to get through the religious stuff, and I said, "Well, what do you think about trans people?" And and the priest said, "Hmm, I don't really know, but I know this. God always wants us to learn how to love more deeply and to accept people
Yeah.
as they are. And I
Mhm.
would not be surprised if God put trans people in the world for us to open up our compassion and to understand someone that we can't understand, or at least to show love and compassion
Mhm.
to people that we may not understand. He said,
Yeah.
as a cisgender white male, I'll never understand being gay. I can empathize with what you go through. He said, I'll never understand somebody that feels the need to transition because
Mhm.
I don't have that. But I can empathize with them. I know what it might feel
Mhm.
like, but I can't walk that journey.
Yeah.
And I thought that was probably the most honest answer I've ever heard anybody in the religious community say is that I don't know and I can understand how
Mhm.
God can work through that.
Well, yeah, and I love that you sort of bring this up. This allows me to talk about something that I think is important. We go through life not understanding quite a few things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if those of us who have at least a spiritual lead in our lives, if not like
Mm-hmm.
downright religious, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is this ask that you believe in things that are not explainable,
Mm-hmm.
right? We
Yes,
have plenty of things like you go outside of that to the scientific community, we have plenty of things that are not explained, and we still
that's
believe
right.
that they happen,
Yep.
right? But I think the thing that I really try to impart to people that are outside of the LGBTQI community, and particularly that don't know anything about trans, like number one, I am probably the first trans person people meet, or one
Mm.
of the few that they know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm usually the only one at the company I work for, right? Like there's not a lot of us, right? We're roughly 0.6% of the population in the United States, which leads to I think like 1.5 million. Globally, there's like 47 million of us potentially. That's a lot of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think most people's, if they were took a moment to reflect and they set aside the dogma in the media, maybe the
Mm-hmm.
dogma taught to them by the church, maybe their understanding. The root of that, honestly, is that the discomfort that people feel with trans people is probably more rooted in the idea of changing their gender,
Mm-hmm.
which feels to them quite unsettling,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because they feel at home in their gender.
Mm-hmm.
It matches who
Mm-hmm.
they are in their masculinity or their femininity. It matches who they are. And that sense of at homeness that you feel, the fact that you don't have to think about your gender, it fits neatly into your worldview. You might describe yourself as a mom, a wife, whatever, someone with a career, someone with a podcast, but probably mom or wife or something like that's going to work their way in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
That mild discomfort people have at me because I'm in front of them, because it makes them sort of think about what would that be like. That's how I lived for
Mm-hmm.
50 years. That mild
Yeah.
discomfort you're feeling, take that times 10 across 50 years that I
Mm-hmm.
no longer have today. I feel at
Mm-hmm.
home and aligned with who I am for the first time in my life. And I think this is something people fundamentally misunderstand about trans people.
Mm-hmm.
They are projecting their discomfort with being a different gender than they are, which is a
Mm-hmm.
natural feeling for most
Mm-hmm.
people. And if we could recognize that instead of project that onto me to solve for you so that you don't feel uncomfortable, it would be far more easy to understand trans people. If you could wrap your head around the fact that being male is as discomforting to me as the idea of you being male, right? Who's in the correct state of your gender, that's who we are. That's what we deal with. And the amount of angst that causes is off the charts. And there's been some really interesting studies that have been done where they have given cross-sex hormones to people and they instantly start feeling the dysphoria that those of us who are trans that are not on the right hormones, right? As a part of testing this stuff. It's a really unethical study, but it's really quite revealing.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
So it happened quite a ways back, right? But at the end of the day, like if you set aside everything else, what's at play for you and your discomfort with me probably has not as much to do with the dogma that's out there. It's your own discomfort with the idea of being a different gender. And that feeling you're having is what we live with until we make the appropriate change.
Oh, well said. And I like that you said that you're at home with your gender. At home, that means that you're safe, hopefully, and that
Yes.
that's it's a safe home and it's love, but
Yeah.
it's that knowing that you can be yourself. You can be yourself and you're not trying to always pretend or fit into something that you're not. Yeah.
Yeah, I what you're getting is who I am 24/7. This is who I am all the time. I'm very at home. I'm very comfortable with myself. I'm very comfortable with myself out in public. Frankly, I love who I am so much. The amount of self-love I've given myself to lift myself up far outdistances any upset that anyone has with me for being who I am, which is why you really can't upset me with your anti-trans rhetoric, because like it doesn't change who I am. It doesn't impact who I am. It shows you as a bigot. I hate to say it, but it does. But when we think about, let me back up for a second. When we think about one of the things this country loves to consume is the person who's been on the journey of self-discovery and has overcome something amazing. Cancer. They've climbed Everest. They had 4 businesses that failed and they're finally successful. They've written the book that's huge. They're an actor that finally made it after coming from, a really poor and terrible situation in West Virginia, perhaps. I don't know. We love those stories. Every trans person in this country is living that story. If you want to see people who've overcome, who are resilient, who have embraced their truest self and let go of who they haven't, you want to look at trans people.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up because that brings us back to your book.
Yes.
So let's talk about your book.
Okay, let's do it. So Advice from Your Trans Aunty is a book that I'm almost done writing. I'll be turning in my manuscript in 2 weeks. I'm on the very last chapter. With Publish Your Purpose.
Yes.
Yes. And it comes out I've always wanted to write. Like to back up a little bit, my mom's she loves to write poetry. She studied English. Her father was a professor of English at Texas A&M. Her brother was a professor of classics at Dartmouth. So I come from a family of people who write, but I never really had anything to write about. I wrote for advertising. I wrote for my job, right? And after, kind of coming out and sort of rising within the workplace to someone who had a voice that could use that to advocate for others, I found myself fielding questions from people all the time, not just sort of the nuts and bolts of transition of like, what doctor should I see, or what hormones should I consider, or what surgery should I have, but like life in the process. Like what happens when this thing happens to me, Erica? And so I've answered so many of those questions that while having lunch with a friend last fall, she was getting ready to go on like a whirlwind tour of India for 6 months. So
wow.
She's from India, but she was going back. Well, her family's from India. And I was talking to her like, yeah, I just really want to write something, but I don't think we need yet another trans memoir. There's plenty of those. They're great. I don't really want to do that. And she's like, well, Erica, the thing that you're the best at is answering people's questions. Write about that. You talk about it all the time. Write about it. And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. And so here we are. almost done with the book. I think there's 50 to 60 questions in there. I haven't counted officially, so that could be off. And it's everything from what to do when you're questioning your gender all the way to like the chapter I'm writing now, which is advocacy, how to get involved in advocacy, right? It deals with relationships. It deals with those early days of transition. It deals with a lot of perspectives, right? And it's in that you will get my story at a high level because I tell, I'm a storyteller, I tell stories, right? So yeah, that's where we are. It's almost done. We're all very excited about it.
I'm very excited about it too. And I just want to tell people that even if you're not trans, I'm going to buy the book because I want to be able to learn more. You know, it would be a way for you to learn more about the trans community. And also if you have a child that's coming, you know, thinking about being trans or thinking that that's where they're headed, then you can learn and have these questions answered. Now it's going to be from Erica's perspective, and your child has their own perspective. However, man, this is like a gold mine of information at your fingertips. So I think it could cross over to, you know, to the straight community. And
I think that one of the things that this book offers is not just a book for my community. It's a book for allies. It's a book for people that have trans people that are in their families or their friends, or maybe they know someone that's trans at work, or you think that you might run into a trans person and you want to know more about it. This book will give you the perspective of the things that we go through, the things that we deal with, not just like people really anchor to the surgeries that happen. And let me just burst the bubble here for you.
Spoiler alert.
60%. And by the way, there's trans people beyond trans women. There are trans men, right? Okay, so let's be, and there's non-binary people that, you know, may have one or may have no gender or multiple genders. And I'm not even going to try to like bring your audience up to speed on that.
Right.
The fact that, and this sort of goes back to what I was telling you about being in Arkansas and the inappropriate questions I asked. I had someone who I was literally having lunch with for the first time at a table with 5 other people ask me, like, have you had this surgery? That's not a question I want to answer at lunch.
Oh my God.
That's also not a question that someone I've known for 5 minutes,
nanosecond,
get to ask me. That's something that no one beyond my partners and my very close circle of friends needs to know the answer to. And if that's what you want to know, you're wanting to know the most salacious piece of information about us. By and large, 60% of trans people don't have that surgery. Why? Because either they don't want it or they can't afford it, right? They have to have good insurance. They have to be in a state where they can get it. And they have to be able to have a lot of expendable cash to get it done. If our expectation that to be trans, you've had all the surgeries and done all the things, then you're really cutting off 60% of the community, right? There's a whole spectrum of ways to be trans. So stop asking people about the surgery. I didn't ask you what's going on in your pants, right? I don't want to know. It's none of my business, right?
I love that.
So this book should go a long way in giving people a really deep look into the things that we wrestle with, the issues that we have to work on. Being trans is an issue in your life. It's not the only issue in your life. It gives you a point of view on what it's like to be in the workplace, what it's like to get asked these questions, right? So it's, I think, a really valuable book for anybody who wants to know more, and reading a memoir doesn't really seem to fit their needs. Now, there's quite a bit of information you can find out there on the internet in terms of like the nuts and bolts, the procedures, the process. And there's I give a couple good sources in the book. So you go somewhere that's trustworthy.
Good.
Right. But what I want for people to come out of this with is, oh, I see that trans people wrestle with a lot, right? They're going through a lot and they're just trying to find themselves. Maybe my job isn't to be interested in them to satisfy some sort of salacious need, but to enable them to live a healthy and whole life.
Yes. Beautiful.
That's my deal.
That's my deal. I'm sticking to it until I grow.
Yeah, until I grow.
That's right.
And then I'll have a new deal.
That's right. And it is what it is, because we are, and as long as we're above ground and still breathing, we are not done. And who knows which way we're going to go as far as our life, you know?
I'll tell you this, Midge.
Okay.
If I am not working on myself on my deathbed, I will feel like I wasted time.
Yeah. I can't tell you who said this, but it was in one of Wayne Dyer's movies. And somebody had said, don't let the music die within you.
Yeah.
And we all have a song to sing as far as how we express ourselves in the world. And love is the main thing. And as you said, kindness and love, and first for ourselves, so that we can love other people the way that God intended us to love.
Yeah. And honestly, I'll say this to all of your listeners. Like, if you don't know a trans person, I'm the first trans person you're meeting, and that you get to know. And not everybody's like me. People are people, and some of us are great, and some of us have our own stuff that we're going through. We can all have a tough moment, but we're not scary. This is what you get most of the time. We're just trying to be happy and fulfilled in our lives. And if you can't get behind that, I don't know what to tell you.
I know. You got therapy. Y'all need
therapy.
Some
therapy is great. It
can
fantastic.
be great. It can be great. Well, and I appreciate you so much, Erica, and I'm so excited that we both share the Publish Your Purpose family. And I love that. When Erica's book comes out, I'm inviting her back to the Gay with God podcast for a launch, and make sure that you have the links to get the books, and I would love for you guys to really consider using this in your church, whether it's a conversation, a book club. If your church has a book club, get this book. Open up the doors of transformation, and help people to understand that God has created all of us, and we all deserve to be here and to be happy.
We do. Currently, we're looking at November. We'll see. Okay. As you know, with the publishing process, things.
Yes, I do.
And things take some time. So.
Yes, I do.
We'll just say early winter.
Okay, early winter. Erica will let me know when she's ready, and I will get her back booked, and we will bring this adorable book to you. And I just can't wait to read it myself. So, hey, awesome. And we are actually at the church. We are in the beginning stages of opening up conversations at our church with a lot of marginalized communities. And so, we want the church to have real life stories, not just know that, people are struggling. We would like to have real life people come in and talk to us about their story. And, every gay person is different. Every trans person is different, like you said, but people need to be able to have their stories told in real time, because you can read about someone or something, and then when you put the person to it, you can read about homelessness, but if you have a person that tells you the day-to-day struggles, the things that you really don't understand, that's when it gets real. And that's when, anyway, so I would love to, I would love that. And, who knows, we might even Zoom you in or something.
Yeah, for sure. I have to say that I think people connect with stories. Personal stories. Like, if you, there's a lot to read up on out there if you want to, but if you truly want to understand, talk to someone who's part of that community and get their story. It humanizes. And I think when we don't humanize things, it becomes far easier to demonize the thing instead of realize that that's a person living that life.
That's right. That's right. Every person has a story. And I agree.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you told yours. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. And I'm not going to tell y'all why, but Erica was struggling this morning. She had some house issues. So house issues, as we all have experienced house issues. And in the morning, it's no fun. So I appreciate your resilience and your joy at being here. And I'm so glad we had this conversation. So thank you.
Midge can tell you she was concerned at my ability to go on, and I have handled this beautifully in comparison to where I started.
Yes, because you're resilient and you're awesome. Yeah. Okay, so if you guys want to connect with Erica, go to the show page at empoweredmidge.podbean.com, and you'll see the show notes, and you'll see a place to connect with Erica. And remember, the discount code for the Wild Goose will be there as well. If you want to check out the Facebook group that I run on my Gay with God Facebook page, you can, not Facebook page, if you want to check out the Gay with God group that I run on Facebook, you will be able to be in the group, the Faith Journey group, and we explore all sorts of things. How are we doing in our faith? What are our challenges? What kind of support do we need? And sometimes we also explore different passages, or somebody will bring in a movie that we talk about. So it's a really cool group to just kind of sit down and be authentic with, and that is on Facebook, called Gay with God. Remember to answer all the questions, because, sometimes people try to sneak into these groups just to be distractors. Mm-hmm. So I want you to answer all the questions so that I have a better understanding of whether or not you will be the right fit for the group. Not to be exclusionary, but to be protective of the group that I have. Mm-hmm. Okie dokie then. If you are listening to this podcast and you are questioning whether you can be gay and be in a relationship with the God of your understanding, if you identify as LGBTQIA+, or not even sure if you're gay, God has always been with you and within you. Even when you didn't know it, you have always been gay with God. Thank you, everybody. Stay tuned to see how you can join the Gay with God community. And as always, you are loved. I want to invite you to become a part of the Gay with God community. How can you do that? Stay connected by messaging me your thoughts and comments in the comment section under the downloads of the show on the Gay with God show page. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen, and share so we can increase our community outreach and be a light to those who are struggling to claim their faith. Consider being a sponsor so I can highlight your service in our community. We are all worthy of respect and a relationship with the God of our understanding. I want to thank you in advance for supporting this podcast. Together, we as a community will keep this show visible and our community stronger. Deep gratitude to my friend Tim McClendon of Tim McClendon Music for allowing me to use an excerpt from Interlude 4, a song found on his CD entitled Sundance.